Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. It's episode 33. Episode 33, the incredible lost four-word question answers. Four-word questions with answers. It's good to see everybody. And, we get prepared for the show. We run our music and we get everything done. A couple people commenting on the opening music, which is not on this recording, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube. But we were listening to a little bit of Art of Noise, which is a band that was really big in the mid-'80s in the dance scene. I used to work in a nightclub in Florida, and they had a video that was out there called Close to the Edit, which was this little girl attacking a piano with a chainsaw. And I love that tune, but the song I played earlier, just before as the walk-in music, was called Moments in Love, and it's a really beautiful, spooky kind of... Boy, I don't know. I really liked it. It was kind of magical in a nightclub at South Miami Beach called 1235. It was previously called Club Z. It was a gigantic theater. It was a huge, like a ballroom theater, and they made it into a nightclub, took all the seats out. And then 1235, we'd get it dark in there, and people get going and jumping around like fleas. And I did the lasers and the lights and the videos up there. I would, we'd wait for the right moment, and after people were a little bit tired, you'd kind of just drop the lights to black in this cavernous room, just huge room. Drop the lights down to black, and that beginning of the Moments in Love, and we just run a few lasers through that big room, those big, bright, blue-green beams coming through this gigantic room. It was pretty magical. It really was. I'll make a quick judgment here. I light this thing, and I get it going. We have this internal camera on the Mac Pro that I'm using, and when I set it up, everything's great, but when I sometimes leave and come back, it resets itself. I want the brightness a little bit brighter, and the only way for me to do that is to turn those background lights down just a bit. So everybody stay right where you are. Don't move. Hang on. I'm still here. I'm speaking to you from across the room. Now I'm out of frame slightly. Don't panic. And now I'm back. It's like I never left. I know that must have been traumatic for many of you. Now it's actually a little bit too bright on my face. I'm going to turn it back up just a little bit. So please do not panic again while I go out of frame somewhat and adjust the background lighting, which is what the camera is reading. Because unfortunately, this camera does not have presets. If it had presets that stuck, we wouldn't have these problems. I just have it lit once and everything would be copacetic. I'm a lot happier with that now. I don't want to look, overly bright or dim for the whole show. So we have today four-word questions. Part of our ongoing series of learning to refine the language and to use precision in our thinking. So last week we did the white belt edition, which was 5-word questions. This week it's 4-word questions. Can you guess what it'll be next week? It'll be 3-word questions, and then it will be 2-word questions. And then you would think it would be 1-word question, but this is where I have you, because in between the 2-word questions and the 1-word question, which will be, America, ? In between that'll be the black belt edition, the 1-word question. In between the 2-word and the 1-word questions, we're going to have the penultimate challenge, which will be the haiku-only edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. We'll save that for a little bit later. As usual, we got a lot of stuff to do today, but I know people are panicking. People are saying, what's going on? There's a person in the frame. Now there's not. I don't know what to do. Is the world coming to an end? Should I turn on the radio, listen for the emergency broadcast signal? Everybody's just completely wigging out. Don't worry. Everything's copacetic. It's all going to be cool. It'll be good. It's all good. All right, so we got one page today, but they're 4-word questions, so they're fairly short, and I can't do these 2-hour shows anymore, not because I can't do them. I can do them all day. I love doing them. But I can't subject you to that. That's too much show. So we're going to shoot for an hour to 90 minutes. That's our goal for tonight. So our first forward question comes from Mark Getz, who writes, "Forward questions only?" My response would be, forward questions only. Moving on, Ron Leathers wants to know, is Sharpton a racist? I always like to start the show with a little bit of humor, just something to loosen the crowd up, get people lubricated. Neil Jones wants to know, the Free Frontier, please, which is connected somewhat to Ruth Olson, want Virgin Galactic ticket. So it's time for me to discuss this Free Frontier thing, which I haven't done in a little while here. I haven't forgotten about it, believe me. Several episodes ago, a year ago, somewhere in there. I'm sorry, I just looked over in the questions, comment sections, which lags the show by about 10 or 15 seconds. Mark J. Harris asked about a no-word question round. Now that's genius. That's the Zen round, where you'll ask no-word questions, and my response will be the gap between the words. Free Frontier. Neil, thanks for bringing it back up. The Free Frontier is something that I've been thinking about and working on a little. I haven't been working on a lot. There's going to be some major announcements to make in the near future. I can't make them just yet, but I mean in the next week or two, for everything that's going on here, which I think will be really, really good for everybody. Hopefully, people will be excited about it. A lot of people said in the comments today, "How can I help?" And we'll show you how you can help. Let's get a white balance here. Terrifying. So back to the Free Frontier. What the Free Frontier is, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is going to be something that's going to be included with the whole new Bill Whittle experience. But it's going to be completely independent of me. The Free Frontier is a 501c3, and it's dedicated to putting Americans back in space and keeping them there forever. We're never coming home. We'll rotate crews, but we are going to be in space. We're going to be there forever. And the idea of the Free Frontier is just predicated on so many of the other things that are working, like your Declaration Entertainment membership and all these other subscription things. So many of us have these recurring charges on our debit cards, and you have to be a little careful sometimes. I know it's maybe not in my interest to say this professionally, but it certainly is ethically. Sometimes if you have a credit card and you have the same number for years, I know I was in a period there probably about 5-6 years ago where I must have had 11 recurring charges on my credit card, and some of these services I wasn't even using anymore. But with that said, what it'll be is it'll be a 501c3, be fully tax deductible, and we will go out there and pitch the idea of this foundation to the American people, and we'll basically ask them to put $9.99 a month on their card in order to keep Americans in space. So round numbers, it's $10 a person per month, recurring on your Visa card. And what that will buy you is, we're not selling tourism directly. We're not selling. We're not even really selling aerospace directly. Ultimately, you have to understand your market. You have to understand your audience. So what we're really selling is pride. We're selling a belief that our best days are ahead of us and not behind us, that the initial space program up to and including the moon landing was just the beginning. It was a rush program done through a giant government agency, which succeeded and made us all very proud, but that the future of space exploration belongs to individual citizens, to free frontier, free people, free companies, and so on. So basically, if you do the math, if you have 1 million members, that's a big number. That's a big number, but it's an achievable number. It's 1/3 of 1% of the population of this country. You get 1/3 of 1% of the population of the country, 1 million people, to put in $10 a month. That's $10 million a month. That's $120 million a year. $120 million a year goes a very, very long way. Very, very, very long way in terms of R&D for companies that are already out there and for companies that are starting to get going. We're not talking about Lockheed or Boeing or any of these guys. There might be some world where we make some kind of investment in them, but they don't need the money. I'm talking about companies like Xcore and Armadillo and Blue Origin and Bigelow. SpaceX is well on its way. I don't think SpaceX needs a whole lot more help, but we may buy some of their rockets. because if you look at the X Prize, Burt Rutan built a spaceship. He built a space program. Burt built a launch vehicle, a suborbital vehicle, and he built all of that for about 30, 40, might have been as much as $50 million of Paul Allen's money, the Microsoft co-founder. He wrote a check for $40 million. And it got us a space program, got us four flights out of the atmosphere into actual, by God, outer space for $40, $50 million. That was the total cost. So you can see if you raise $120, and that was over several years. If you can raise $120 million a year, you can do some real good. Real good. If you get 10 million Americans, again, that's a third of 1%. I'm sorry, 10 million Americans is 30 million Americans is 10%. So it's about 3% of the population. Then, at 10 million Americans, that's $100 million a month. That's $1.2 billion a year. And you cannot build the hardware that fast. You simply would have a space program that was humming to the degree that no one can... You'd actually be building money. Your bank account would be growing, even if you were spending it as fast as you could. They can't build the hardware that fast. So after 2 or 3 years, because most people think it would take about $2 billion, $3 billion of private money to go back to the moon and stay there, after 2 or 3 years, this program will be generating enough money to put us in space and keep us in space, because we would be spending 5 or 6 pennies on the dollar compared to what NASA and the government spends. That's the actual number. When you can go to Home Depot and get a part or a screw, or go to Aircraft Spruce and pick up aviation-grade bolts, you can buy those bolts for 60 cents. NASA buys them for $11 each, or 50, because NASA has to do a metallurgy report. NASA has to do a whole import thing. They have to trace the stuff back to the manufacturers. No, Aircraft Spruce has aviation-grade bolts that have a stamp on them that give you a very, very reliable idea of what the load is. And that's what we're going to use. So if you think it through, you really can do this. It really can be done in a matter of several years. And the thing I wanted to stress about the Free Frontier is we're selling pride, but we're also selling progress. Progress means doing things that weren't done last week or last year. So we're putting money into R&D, and we're talking about manned spaceflight. That means we're going to take some risks. We're going to take a lot more risks than NASA took. We can do it because we're a private company. We're not beholden to the government. We're not beholden to Congress. We're not beholden to public opinion. The only people we have to make happy are the members of the Free Frontier. That'd be you. And speaking as a member and as a potential passenger, and frankly, guys, I'm doing this to fly some of these things. I'm not going to just sit back and watch this. I'm a decent pilot, not experienced like some of these guys. I'm not going to be the test pilot, but I expect to fly some of these things. And that means I'm going to be at risk for some of these things. We can't wait till they're 100% safe, because nothing's 100% safe. So do you fly when it's 90% safe, 95? We got to learn how to do this. The reason commercial aviation is so safe in America today, despite the Ariana crash, which in my opinion doesn't count. Well, it's not my opinion. It doesn't count. We haven't had a major domestic airline crash in this country in almost 12 years, 13 years. That's unbelievable. How did we learn to do commercial aviation? Well, we learned how to do commercial aviation with that kind of safety record by killing a lot of people in airplane crashes. We didn't do it intentionally. But every time something happened, we learned something new. And we applied new procedures and new engineering and new maintenance and new navigation. But you have to go. You have to go and try. And then when you go and try, you find out what works and what doesn't. I just saw, again, a little bit of a lag here in the comments question. Somebody said, would you put advertising on the rockets? That was Rebel Gamer. Rebel Gamer, I would put so much advertising on these rockets that it would make NASCAR blush. It's all about private enterprise, all about promotion. So let me give you a little bit more of it. So what do the members get? If you're paying $9.95 a month on your credit card, what do you get? Well, the first thing you get is you get the satisfaction of watching an American space program that happens in real time, which means that as a member, you get updates, weekly updates, if not more frequently, of the actual tests of people building these things. We give a company, just off the top of our heads, like Armadillo. I'm not connected to Armadillo. Forget it. Let's just say we give a company called WAW Space Systems. let's forget that too, because that's nepotism. We give Translunar Engineering Incorporated $50 million to develop their lander over the course of the year. That's, $5 million, $4 million a month out of the 10 or 20 that we're making, or 100 a month. So they've got the money to go. And let's say they're based in Midland, Texas, where a bunch of good aviation companies are going to be going, because that's a spaceport. So in exchange for your $40 or $50 million, we say, we want videotape. Hire a videographer or a kid, get an intern, to videotape everything. We want you to videotape what you're doing so our members can see what's going on. That means that once a week you get an update on, hey, here's Translunar's, they're doing their first engine test, first static engine test. Fantastic. Uh-oh, that's not good. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. Maybe somebody will be hurt. We have to take losses if we're going to succeed. Anyway, you'll get all those updates, but you get more than that. Because I think this came to me late, and I may not have discussed this in such detail before. But what you also get is this. Once we start this thing, even if we buy just a little jet that I would use to fly around the country in, like, I don't know. Where did it go? I must have it. I always have it. It's here somewhere. Let's just say, off the top of our heads, just for the fun of it, that we were to start our free frontier with a purchase. Oh, did I delete it, you dummy? Oh, hang on one second. I just got to show you guys this stuff. No, I think I probably punched it in the car. You know what? I'll get to it later. Anyway, let's just say we buy a Viper jet. That's our first purchase for $500,000. And the Viper jet is designed to fly around the country, and we go around trying to raise more money. And if that's all we have to start off with, then for your $9.95 a month, starting from the beginning, for your $9.95 a month, you get a chance as a lottery, as a raffle of the membership only. Once a month or twice a month, you get to go for a ride in the Viper jet. We pick a member and we take them for a ride for the Viper jet. And then let's say we're 2 years down the road and we have a reliable, maybe not even that long, because X-Corps is building a terrific two-person suborbital vehicle called the Lynx. So if you're a $9.95 a month member of the Free Frontier, maybe once a month we do, or twice a month, we do a suborbital ride. So if you want to fly in, by God, outer space, it doesn't cost you $200,000 like it does with Virgin Galactic. It costs you $9.95. $9.95 for a chance. So it's a lottery ticket, and I understand the chances aren't great, but they're much better than they are for the lottery. And so you always have a chance to go. And as we get the technology more and more advanced, and as the safety levels come up, well, when it's relatively safe, we'll have a pretty good liability release. But as it gets safer and safer, then you want to fly an orbital mission. Well, once we've got that established and it's safe, our members are paying for it. It belongs to them. That space program belongs to you. You're paying for it. So once or twice a month, or once or twice a mission, or whatever, for $9.99 a month, you can fly and orbit around the Earth and stay in one of our inflatable hotels for 3 days. And for $9.95 a month, we can put you on a translunar mission. And for $9.95 a month, you can walk on the moon. And ultimately, I think my goal would be, I've talked to some aerospace engineers about this, and they said, what's your end product? How far do you see this going? And the limit of my vision, and I think this is limit enough because somebody will take it over and then we'll look at the limit of their vision. But the limit of my vision is I want to create 2 vehicles. I'd like for them to be nuclear powered because the specific impulse, it's the amount of energy that you can get out of a pound of fuel. The more energy you can get out of a pound of fuel, the more thrust you can produce, the further, not the further you can go, the faster you can go, faster you can get there. So a specific impulse is a measure of the efficiency of fuel burned. That's a shorthand, but it's not too bad. So, whoa, something just crashed back there. I jumped like a cat. The specific impulse of a chemical rocket like the Saturn V main engines was 250 seconds. The specific impulse of the shuttle main engines after a generation of engineering got up to about 450 seconds. But a bad nuclear rocket, like the one we built with the NERVA program, back in 1967, 68, 69, we had nuclear rockets that had a specific impulse of 800 seconds. We could probably get it up to 900 or 1,000. That's not a burn time. It's a measure of efficiency with the fuel. So nuclear rocket's at least twice as efficient as a chemical rocket, and as we develop the technology to be more and more. But put that aside for a minute. The limit of my vision is to build 2 vehicles that have I don't want to say range, because it can come down to range. It comes down to, what's the word I'm looking for? Endurance. You have an endurance of a year or two, somewhere in that ballpark, 8 months, a year, 2 years, something like that. And they'd be two identical vehicles. I would build two of them. They'd be the Mark I, Conestoga class or whatever. And what I originally thought was a spinning vehicle, but it occurred to me if you had two vehicles that were linear vehicles, basically just two fuel tanks and crew compartments, and if you put the crew compartments in back of the fuel tanks and you put docking modules on the front of these two vehicles, you could launch them both at the same time. This is why this is important. If you launch two of them at the same time, they'd be on the same vector to their destination. They'd stay together basically for the entire flight and the entire way home. And each vehicle would be designed so that under emergency situation, each one would be able to keep the crew of the other. In other words, each vehicle is is the other one's lifeboat. So if you had two of them on the same vector, and one of them had a catastrophic failure, assuming that failure didn't kill the crew would be able to dock these things and would be able to survive and come back on the other ship. It'd be tough, but it could be done. So I would build two of these vehicles, the Mark I's, and once I had them up and running, we'd do translunar missions for practice. We'd send them around the moon, bring them back. When landing is a different issue, somebody's going to build us a lander. We'll take the lander on one of these vehicles. We'll put it in lunar orbit, drop the lander, come back up, fine. But once you have these vehicles that can travel throughout the solar system with relatively high efficiency and have a decent endurance, I'd launch them on a mission, on a vector. Once the burn was finished, which is only a few minutes, if not an hour or two at the top end, they're coasting for the rest of the mission. I'd have them dock, and then I'd have them rotate around each other like this, provide a little artificial gravity out on the ends. If you had the crew compartments down low rather than up high, that'd work. And people say, where would you send them? I'd send the first real mission to Venus. Nobody thinks about Venus. Everybody talks about Mars. Everybody talks about Mars. And Mars is a much better place to go. You cannot land on Venus. Venus is uninhabitable and will be for centuries. If we're successful, it'll be uninhabitable for centuries. But the reason I would go to Venus is because Venus is a much, much easier mission in terms of total energy. It's much closer to the Earth than Mars is. It's inside our orbit rather than outside our orbit. And we would just do a flyby. We'd burn enough energy. We'd do a flyby of Venus, and we'd come back to Earth. Pretty short mission, not terribly long, but, and I ran this past an aviation guy. I said, why Venus? I said, because, Brent, if we did that, we would be the first interplanetary travelers. We'd be private American citizens who went to a different planet by ourselves on our credit cards for $9.95 a month. Think about that, dude. And he thought about it. So I'd have two ships. This is the end of the line for Billy. I'd have two ships. I'd have them be identical. And I'd name the first one Constitution, and I'd name the second one Enterprise. And I would send these two vehicles to Venus. And I would find the most experienced, most capable, most extraordinary astronaut commander I could, and I'd put him in command of the Constitution, and I would command the Enterprise. Because ultimately, everything that is good that happens in this world is driven by personal ambition. Everything that happens that's good is driven by personal ambition. And that's my personal ambition. I want to walk on the moon, and I want to command the Enterprise. And I want to travel to other planets. I've wanted to do this in my entire life. You look at the pictures on the wall behind me, you can see there. It's so hard to do this in a reflection. Okay, that picture is a picture of a guy pointing out Saturn to a beautiful girl. And these pictures over here are Sid Mead artwork of the future that I was promised and didn't get. Now, instead of being bitter about it and getting drunk and crying about it and being a victim, why don't we just go make it? Let's just go make this future. Why not? All we need is money and will. We've got the will and we've got the money. $9.95 a month for a space program. Is it worth it to you as an American to have a space program? Is it worth 2 Starbucks coffees a month? I think it is. And I think you'd get to people. I think people would get this. I really do. I don't think getting 3 million people would be a problem. 10 million people. I'm sorry, I think I probably blew the math earlier. 10 million Americans is the number I want. That's $100 million a month. I think we could get them too. And I wouldn't make this political. I'd make this completely open. And it's not open just to Americans, by the way. I had a neat thought about that. And my thought is, if we have one subscriber from Mozambique one subscriber from, Ecuador, one, then that flag goes on that mission. One. And so, bring the world with us, because it's not ultimately about America. It's an American idea, but it's not about America. It's not about the American government. We're flying the American flag. We're American citizens. But if we have people who are engineers from China and all these other things, it's great. Then I started talking to some other people about this, and they said, you could build a facility, and there are any numbers of states that would give you some big tax breaks, because you would now you're talking about building an engineering foundation. And I was sitting up there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, looking across that lake, and I looked across that lake, and like a vision, I said, there it sits. I just saw this kind of cluster of kind of nice, low buildings, clean, really, kind of together, kind of a campus. I thought, man, that's Starfleet Command over there. And you would then pull the brightest people from America. You'd get the brightest engineering students from America, and you'd pay them to work on rockets and electronics, navigation, biological systems, all the stuff you'd need. And the American people would be paying for this. And when I say the brightest people in America, I don't mean just America. If I had a chance to bring really top-level engineers and scientists over from India or China or Japan or wherever, Ecuador, then I would bring them, and I would make sure I put all of my political eggs into very, very few baskets politically. I'd take all of the political might that we could wield, and I'd concentrate on 2 or 3 different little things that wouldn't make a lot of waves. I'd concentrate on getting the regulations clear so that we can go into space and do this. That's the only thing I would really put the money into politically. And the only other thing I'd do politically would be I would make sure that every single person that came to work at Starfleet Command, basically, at Free Frontier headquarters, had a direct path to citizenship, because I don't want to make great engineers for the rest of the world, and I don't want great Indian or Chinese rocket engineers to be Indian or Chinese rocket engineers in India or China. I want them to come here and become American citizens. That's the way this country's always worked. I want the best people in the planet to come here and do this, and I want them to get the reward. Because if you live in India or China and you see Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or someplace like that, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to lose your mind. Everybody wants to be there. I want to be there too. So that's the plan. And then I'll tell you what I would do with some of the money. You get a chance to go to a trip. You get a chance to be an interplanetary traveler. You get a chance to go to Venus or Mars or something for $9.95 a month. And by the way, if you were selected from the lottery, your rate doesn't go up. I think it'd probably be fair to say once you've won, you probably couldn't win again. But who knows? Maybe not. Maybe no. Hit the lottery twice. Nobody's rate goes up. You go. You take the risk and you go with us because it's yours. It belongs to you. The space program is yours. It's not somebody else's. So that's the basic plan. And what I would do for a commercial, for those of you that haven't heard it, I'm so in love with this. I would take the first money we raise and buy a Super Bowl ad, or whatever turns out to be most cost effective. Maybe it's Yahoo front page ad or something, but a Super Bowl ad, let's say. And the Super Bowl ad would look something like this. You would see the surface of the moon. It'd be in HD, so it's brand new, modern-looking stuff. You see the lunar surface, and off in the distance there'd be a lander, and it'd be a more advanced lander than the Apollo landers, bigger and it's more modern-looking. And then you see the lander on the moon. It's already on the moon, and you watch a little spacesuited figure coming down the ladder, and then you cut away to families, and everybody's leaning forward. It's it's late at night, and it's a historic event, and then a little caption comes across the bottom, and it says, August 29th, 2022, or something like that. And the guy comes down off the ladder, and he's got a flagpole, and he starts hammering this flagpole into the lunar surface, and you cut to all these families from all around the world watching this, and then the guy unfurls this flag, and there's this kind of ruffle of color, and all of a sudden you cut to the guy standing there, this astronauts saluting the flag, and it's the flag of China. It's the Chinese flag on the moon, and you see the astronauts saluting the Chinese flag, and you hear him speaking in Chinese, saying this is another step on the glorious long march of socialism, and so on and so on and so on. And it's like hits every single American right smack in the guts. Like, we used to own it, and now we're watch it just sail away. So you watch this guy salute the flag, and you hold on that image for a second, then you just do the slow pan to the left across the lunar surface, and then as you pan left, you see the Earth hanging above the lunar horizon, and below that's a couple of domes, and it says Earthlight Motel vacancy, and that's flashing. And then down below, you see 3 Americans leaning against a rover with American flags on their patches, watching this Chinese guy salute the flag, and this one guy turns to the other and he says, well, don't just stand there, get the man's bags. So the other astronaut gets in the buggy and drives over to where the Chinese guy has just landed and picks up some of his science packages and sits him down in the buggy and rides him off to the motel that says vacancy, and you hear the voiceover over the radio. The guy says, really glad to have you here, you're going to like it, we'll get you a nice shower, we got a casino, we got a water park, you're going to have a great stay. And then it says, Americans on the moon forever, $9.95 a month. And that's how we would do it. So that's the free frontier. And the free frontier, please? Yes, it's coming. I have some other things I have to take care of first, but it's coming. So hold that thought. I think it's worth 2 cups of coffee for the American people. I think I could find 10 million Americans who'd be willing to sacrifice $9.95 a month to go back into space and not ever leave, especially if they were seeing real progress on a weekly basis. So, and we do videos of people coming back from the flights. You just took a suborbital flight? Yep, guy gets out. Fantastic. Where are you from? I'm Bob Butterworth from Dayton, Ohio. Did you have a good time? Had a blast. That's interesting stuff, too. So anyway, that's the free frontier. Thanks for asking. And Ruth Olson said, want Virgin Galactic ticket? I can't afford one, Ruth, but I can afford $9.95 and a chance for one. Virgin Galactic tickets are $200,000. They have so many bought, it's beginning to look problematic as to whether or not they'll be able to fly them off. But we're going. So that's that. Dave Olson wants to know, he's been asking this quite a few times, I think, Arroyo, release date, format? 4 words, well done. Jeremy's been working on a deal to get the distribution for this thing, and it's been very, very back and forth. But there is a deal, and the deal is getting finalized. So it will be in DVD format. There'll be a direct digital download format, and the movie's done. I did the cut on it. It's been a while, about a year since I did the cut, and then there's a lot of special effects. We were doing the edit. Jeremy said, and this is where this back window from this pickup truck's going to explode into a shower of glass. We're going to see bullet holes in the windows, just going to get shot out. And I said, yeah, sure it is. I know what can be done. I just didn't think there was anything like the horsepower to do it, or the talent. But there's a producer on the show, a young guy named Jonathan Hay, who works here with us at the office, one of the best people I ever met. And Jonathan is relatively new to After Effects, and Jonathan just got in there and made it happen. So now when the car goes driving down the street, boom, 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 and tink, 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 and bullet holes appear on the truck, and windows get shot out, and it's absolutely astonishing. That took a while. And then they had to score it and all this other stuff, but the film is done, and it's just getting ready to ink this announcement. And once that contract is signed for the distribution, because Jeremy took some private money in addition to the membership funds to get it done, a significant amount of private money, and he's got to try to return that to them. But that distribution deal looks like it'll be done, and so we'll have some kind of a video announcement when it's finished. But I don't think it's going to be very long. So sorry about that, Dave. I wish I had an absolute date, but it's going to be close. It'll be DVD and a digital download, and it's really terrific. I mean, it's just amazing what he did for the money, and it's a feature film. It's an honest-to-God real movie. So looking forward to that. Joshua Tiemans hits the first real kind of fastball of the day. But I like this question for 2 reasons. He asks, will America live on? Yes, it will, Josh. I'm sure it will. But the question you have to ask yourself is, what is America? I think that's really the issue. Certainly the geography will be here. Nobody has any question about that. Yosemite National Park's not going anywhere, and neither are the amber waves of grain, although it's a world where there's not so much grain. So obviously the country will be here. I know that's kind of a simplistic answer, but I'm just trying to build a case here. The geography will be here. The government that we have now, I don't know. I'm really so appalled at what I'm seeing and the destruction of everything. But really, the most immediate pressing issue is the destruction of our economy with this incredible debt and this out of control spending. If the economy of the United States collapses, the whole world goes. And when that happens, nobody knows what's beyond that. Nobody. So there's a good chance that the American government, as we understand it, and the American way of life as we know it today, will in fact disappear. I don't think that a dark age is definitely possible, not because of Terminators or because of asteroid impacts or any of that stuff. It's because the people we elected to Congress couldn't control their spending. They bankrupted the country years ago, decades ago. They've been just spending, and accelerates. It just accelerates. This can't go on forever, and something's going to happen, and it's probably going to be bad. But so the question is, will America survive? Will it live on? Yes, because ultimately, America's an idea. America is an idea, and if the society gets so complex and so entitlement heavy that it collapses under its own weight, it's going to be awful. It's unimaginable. It's going to be unimaginable. But when that's over, there'll be something on the other side, and what you'll see is, I think, is a return to individualism, only because this weight. Look, what we're like, what America's like, is a healthy person swimming in a river in Brazil or something, and you come out, and there's a leech attached to you. Okay, a healthy organism can frankly afford a couple of leeches, several. But as more and more leeches attach to the host organism, and as more and more come on them, the host organism gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And as he gets weaker and weaker, he's less able to resist them and pull them off. And so more come on, and eventually the parasites will just bleed that host out to death, and then the parasites die. They don't die in the real world because there's other host organisms, but here it's the end of the line. So what'll happen is, if there's an economic collapse or hyperinflation, and these kind of things happen, we're not immune to them, because we're not immune to common sense. You can talk about the Fed, and you can talk about propping up the currency, and you can talk about international buying and China buying up talk about all this stuff. But ultimately, even though these are zeros and ones now, there is a number. And when that debt reaches the point where the first major player says, all right, this is coming down, and I'm going to get my money out before it does. Once the first major players start deciding, game over, I got to get my money out. Once those people start leaving, the whole thing comes down shockingly fast. Happens all the time, historically. I know it's depressing. It's more than depressing. It's horrifying. I had a very good conversation with the gentleman I just talked about, Jonathan Hay and Jeremy Boring. They're sitting here in this very office 2 days ago. And Jonathan pointed out, he said, if this collapse really comes, how am I going to explain this to my family and my kids? He doesn't have any kids yet. He just got married. How will I be able to explain that to them? I thought, wow, dude, that's really kind of profound. He says, yeah, what am I going to say to them? Yeah, I knew it was coming. Yeah, we're sitting around burning tires in the road, eating the last of the rats on a spit over a burning tire. And Dad, you said you knew this was going to happen. Why didn't you do anything? Well, I made videos and I talked about it. And then he said, no, I'm going to start thinking about building an ark. When he said an ark, he didn't mean a literal ark, but he meant a place of refuge. And man, I suddenly just thought, wow, I gotta get an obligation. I have an obligation to do something about this. So it may be time for us to start thinking about arks in terms of structures that would survive this kind of thing. And when I say structures, it doesn't have to be a physical structure. It's a social structure that will survive something like that. Now you're getting down to brass tacks, folks. I know there's a question about survivalism in a minute. I think I took it. But when I think about survivalists, I tend to think I may be wrong about this. In fact, I'm probably wrong about this. But it seems to me we're talking mostly about individuals and small groups out in remote places. We may be starting to need to think about ark structures in reasonable sized towns. And I was talking to Jonathan again about this, and I said, if I ever had to leave L.A. and I was walking or driving down the road and I came to a barricade, which was the limits of, Billtown, and there are guys behind the barricade saying, stop or we'll shoot, because you can't take all the refugees, right? You don't have the resources. I'd get out of my car and I'd put my hands in the air, and I would just, from a long distance away, I'd shout at the top of my lungs, I would say, I am 54 years old. I'm in good physical condition. I am enthusiastic about working in the fields or cleaning latrines or doing any other manual labor that you need to keep this thing going, and I will defend this compound with my life. I have my own rifle. I'm not holding it. I can contribute more than I take out. And I said that to Jonathan, and Jonathan looked at me for a second. He said, that's funny. I understood exactly what you were saying. I just completely understood what you meant. And I said, okay. Now, if I've got my infirm mom with me, then she's going to have to do something. There's lots of things that infirm people can do, but she's going to have to do something, and I'm going to have to work harder to help cover her. And when you get down to this kind of thing, a lot of people start snooking and, oh, you lunatic, crazy conservative knuckle draggers. But ultimately, we're down to brass tacks now, aren't we? You're basically starting from scratch, and you're saying to the people that control the food, I'm willing to work for my food. I'm willing to do more work than I'm going to take out. I'm going to put more in than I take out. Because this whole thing has just collapsed because people took out more than they put in. That's when things are going to get interesting. I don't think it's going to come to that. I really don't. I think there's such a reservoir of common sense and hard work in this country yet today even that I just can't see it getting to that point. But certainly it's not going to stop because the government stopped it. It's going to stop when they can't do it anymore. How much cocaine does a cocaine addict do? All of it. All of it. He does all of it, and he doesn't save some cocaine for a rainy day, and he doesn't put cocaine aside. He does all the cocaine he can do, and then it's gone, and then he has to go get some more cocaine. And that's how the federal government treats money. And so they won't stop until there's no more left, until somebody's arrested them, or until there's no more left. So we have to be careful. We have to be prepared, and we have to stick together. You know, as individuals, as a pack and not a herd, we have to stick together. And there was another question along those lines from Tracy Coyle. It says, do you survival prep? I don't, Stacy. I should. My survival prep in LA consists of a .45 caliber 1911A1 semi-automatic pistol, an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, and an airplane within walking distance. That's my survival prep for LA. I should do more. I have an earthquake kit in my backpack. I have, one of these 2-week or 3-week, maybe I think it's like four man weeks, something like that. One person for 4 weeks, 4 people for something like that. It's in the trunk of my car. So if I get lost or my car runs out of gas or something, or if there's an actual earthquake, I've got the basics, but I'm not doing enough. And it's time to get to a place where I am. Just saw a comment from, as we're moving on, from James Edward Hamilton, who says, Bill, you are the 2013 equivalent to Rod Serling. Have you ever considered doing a Twilight Zone type show? Submitted for your approval. No. One Mr. Miller, who's about to take a trip into oddness and obsolescence. Accompanying him on this fateful journey is the mesmerizing sound of the Twilight Zone. No, James, I haven't, but it's a classic show, and Serling was a genius, and he's one of the people I absolutely admire and revere. He's just unbelievably gifted, brilliant guy, so ahead of his time, died so young. I think he was 52 or something when he died, 50. I'm older than Rod Serling. And, man, what a brilliant guy. That was a little extra gimme, which we do sometimes. More than four questions, more than 4 words, though, so moving on. Alex Flynn wants to know thoughts on the Zimmerman verdict. Oh, do I ever? And you'll find out about this on Friday because I've delayed taping the Afterburner, which I normally do on Tuesday for a Thursday release. I'm going to shoot on Friday because I started looking into this thing and there was just so much there that I just couldn't really, every time I look at something, I find something else that was even more shocking. But I'm doing a fairly in-depth Afterburner, and you can't retry the case and, all this other stuff. My thought on the Zimmerman verdict is I think it's a miracle that the justice system prevailed given the headwind they had to fly up against and what the prosecutor did and what that judge did. I'm going to ask you yet again, I'm going to give you 5 more minutes to decide if you're going to change your mind and testify on the stand. I mean, my God, that was the most appalling thing I've ever seen. But basically the Afterburner is going to be taking the media to trial because the NAACP said that it was like a lynching, and they're right. It was like a lynching. So my thoughts on the Zimmerman verdict, Alex, will be coming up. Sally Morris wants to know, who is Andrew Klavan? Well, not much is known about Andrew Klavan. Some speculate that he may be Arthur C. Clarke's clone son. Others say, no, he's not Arthur C. Clarke's cloned son. Andrew Klavan, for those of you who don't know, is a conservative mystery writer, books and screenplays. I do a show with him called Klavan Whittle, which I do to appease his really tremendously needy sense of self. Needless to say, the show really should be called Whittle Klavan, based on who's doing the actual work, but we call it Klavan Whittle because, Andrew needs all the kind of ego boost he can get, poor guy. And that actually, I think, is the best stuff I do. Certainly the most, I think it's the deepest stuff I do. We do the show. It's a members-only show at PJTV. If you're a member of PJT, you can see it. It's Andrew and I sitting at two opposing chairs on the plane of infinite despair, just a black background, and we get a question and we just knock it back and forth for 6 or 7 minutes. And I can't say enough about the guy. We joke about everything all the time, but I have such enormous respect for him. His Klavan on the Culture show came to PJTV, and I was doing afterburners and just kind of doing things, And then he came out and did Klavan on the Culture called Shut Up, and it did like 40,000 views, which was an insanely huge number. I remember thinking, 40,000 views? My God, I got to get my A game out now. And then I came back with some of these afterburners, and they started to really take off. Yeah, Drew Klavan is just one of the best men I know. He's an extremely kind, very gracious family man, and very bright guy. I learned so much from him. He's such a good guy. He's got such a good heart. I'm not nearly as good a person as he is. And he's really fun to work. Now, if anybody ever says any of this to him, I will deny it, and I'll tear this video off the web before anybody has a chance to hold me to it. Because we all know that Andrew Klavan is a lowlife. I can't even tell you all the things he actually does because, frankly, you'll blow chow all over your televisions and monitors and stuff, and I'm not willing to do that to people's property. So, that's who Andrew Klavan is. Moving on. Alan West for president. Hang on a sec. I have to cross out one I didn't do because it's such an interesting idea. I don't have time for it, and I'll get back to it. David Deering wants to know, Alan West for president, and I say, yes, please. He's, like Andrew Klavan, a guy who I admired prior to working with and meeting, and now that I work with him, I like him even better. I liked him a lot before I met him, but now I like him a lot better. Drew is a great guy. Alan West is the real deal. He's just everything you imagine he would be. Alan West is a genuinely warm guy. He's big. He's not super tall, but he's a tank. He's a huge, enormous, strong guy. He's in great shape. He's again very warm, very kind, very funny, and he's a real leader. He's a real soldier. I mean, I'm a toy soldier. He's the real deal. He's the guy that is out on combat tours in Iraq, and I don't know if he was in Afghanistan, but yeah, Alan West is the real deal. He's smart as a whip. His historical knowledge is out of the park, brilliant. He's prepared, and he's ready. And I want to see that guy run again, and I want to see him go for it. He's 1,000 times the man Barack Obama is, 1,000 times. And he's the real deal. Thinks on his feet. I can't say enough about him. I just adore the guy. And he's back in Washington now, so I don't get to see him as much as I would like, but he's terrific. And he's everything you think he is. He's just that warm and that good and decent. I can't imagine a better president. I can't imagine a better president than him. It's exactly the kind of guy, calm under pressure, that sort of thing. So yeah, Alan West for president. Yes, please. Alan Pontius asks, your best information sources? I actually only have two, to be honest with you, Alan, unless what I do is I scan these once or twice a day. And then if there's something that they scoop up, I'll go after it and start digging deeper. But they're Drudge Report and Instapundit. Those are the only two things I read. I don't listen to Fox News. I don't listen to any conservative talk radio at all. None, zero. I check Drudge Report and I check Instapundit. I check Drudge for the sort of raw data. Nothing big is going to happen if it's not on Drudge. And I check Instapundit because Glenn Reynolds has the best filter I've ever seen. That's all. That's what Instapundit is. It's all of the news being filtered through the eyes of Glenn Reynolds. And Glenn Reynolds has the most amazing ability to pick the stories that I'm interested in and a little bit of quirkiness, a little bit of fun and things like that. So he's terrific. And then the only other site I visit every day is the Chive, which we've talked about before. And I won't go into too much detail here, but it's thechive.com. It's a photo essay site. And there's a fair amount of cheesecake there, but that's a nice reason to go. And they have sister sites that are for beefcake and a sister site for the military and one for auto racing and so on. And I just like it. It's entertaining. It's hilarious. And the community over there is doing amazing things. I've talked about that before. I don't want to get into that right now. But KCCO, you chivers out there, if you don't know what that means, you should go to this site and find out. So I like it a lot. But that's basically my information sources. Alan, thank you. Keith Alleman asks an interesting question. Do you fear happiness? I used to. I don't think I do anymore, but I used to. I used to fear success an awful lot, too. It's a hard thing to come to grips with. I think probably the greatest way to describe this phenomenon for me is as a writer, because if you have an idea that you really like and you just sort of roll it around in your head 100 times and you just really, this is awesome, and you know you're just loving it, you're loving everything about it, and it's really clicking and everything's great, and you got it up here and it's perfect, it's pristine, and then when you have to actually write it and put it on paper, sometimes you get pleasant surprises. Oftentimes you get things that are better than you thought, but somehow usually it's just tough to get it nailed, because everything's perfect until it has to come into the world. This is why socialism fails. And even socialism doesn't work theoretically. I used to say it worked great in theory, it's terrible in practice. Somebody said, no, it's terrible in theory too. I said, boy, you're absolutely right. What's the matter with me? But you get the idea. The problem with the fear of success thing and the fear of happiness thing is you can fail, right? You can try and you can fail. And if you don't try, you haven't failed. And that is seductive. I'm looking for something here. Let me just see if I have it. Maybe I had it at home. It's not here. Let me look again here. 1 second. I bet it's... Yeah, it's at home. Anyway, it was one of these things. Probably saw it on the Chive, and it was basically something to the effect of came in last, beats didn't finish, which trumps never started. And I thought, that's it, man. That's really it. Came in last is better than didn't finish, and didn't finish is 100,000 times better than never started, never tried. So I think really the fear of success, fear of happiness is founded ultimately by a fear of failure. And there's a lot of people out there, and I'm probably one of them, who who on some level when they were young or through most of their lives or whatever, you have to build this. And it's never built as well as it's built if you have really solid parents who really there for you and lay this foundation when you're very, very young. But a lot of people in show business are pursuing something that they're missing. And it's usually something that happened to them in childhood. It's some kind of stability, or it's some kind of attention or affection, these kind of things. And it takes a rare person to build that back out of the need for it, and then just make it kind of a byproduct rather than this kind of this compelling need. But certainly many people in show business have this particular affliction, and I do too. I feel like I've made major steps to overcome it through you. I've said this 100 times before, and I never get tired of saying it. When I started writing for Eject, I was writing away from the stuff I wanted to do, which was movie stuff. I've been working on that my whole life, and just doing the stuff because I felt like I had to say it. I wasn't getting paid for it, obviously, and I didn't think anybody really read it, but they did. And the feedback and the comments I got from people like you watching this now were just elevated me. I just had to rise and become a better person. I just had to stop doing things I was doing because it's like people are depending on me. And that's a remarkable thing. I'm very grateful, and I'll owe you guys for the rest of my life. So I think to answer your question, Keith, my fear of happiness, such as it was, is well behind me. I've got a car I really like. I've got an airplane. I've got an apartment I really like. I don't need to spend a whole lot more money than I'm spending now. I don't. If I made 10 times what I was making now, I'd buy a better airplane, but my life wouldn't fundamentally change. I'm really pretty happy. And I just am very I want to say it's funny how conditioned we are, right? I just said very lucky. I was fortunate in terms of my birth, in the sense that I got parents who instilled certain set of values in me, but the rest of it had nothing to do with luck. It was just hard work over time. It was nothing to do with luck. We talk about the rich are the very fortunate and the poor are very unfortunate. Fortune and fortunate is not, the rich and the poor part is not due to fortune. The rich and the poor part is due to behaviors, and those behaviors came as a result largely of fortune, but those behaviors can be learned. And as I've said before, you can put together a pretty short class, if fit it on a cocktail napkin, of things that you have to do in order to succeed. Hard work in this society, at least in this society up until the present, hard work of any kind, and I'm talking about janitorial hard work, will be rewarded. And a person who has the education to do nothing other than be a janitor, if that person has hard work and some ambition, they will be owning a janitorial company that will be making millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. It can happen to anyone. You just have to figure out what you want and how to get there. That can be learned, and it's free. So maybe we'll do a show on that. Maybe we'll do a success show. Maybe I'll do a success disc. Who knows? Anyway, that's Keith Elliman. Do I fear happiness? Not anymore. Thanks for asking. Let's see. Isaac Tiemans wants to know, oil, gas, or nuclear? Yes, please. Yes, please. Oil, gas, or nuclear would be great. We had a blackout here a couple days ago. I lost a whole day of work. Power went out around 12:31 in Sherman Oaks. Didn't come back till 9 p.m. 8 hours without electricity reminds you of how warm it is here in California. Was at my apartment and my office down. Turns out that I need electricity to work. Who thunk it? Just the sense of sort of, oh man, I can't do anything. And then you go back to the apartment and it's like, I know it's going to be warm. And then I know this sounds absurd, but it's like, oh, I forgot it's going to be dark too. This kind of thing is annoying to me when it happens, especially when it happens for why it happens. But it's annoying, and it's annoying. However, I think if I was a young person and the power went out for that length of time and had never had that experience, I think I'd start to panic because so many of their friends are not friends in the way that I have friends. I know where my actual friends are. I know where they live. I can find them, and I know if I can reach them and I have a problem, they'll help me. So many of these people's friends are electronic friends that, you lose the internet, man, your friends are gone. I lose the internet, my audience is gone. My friends are still here. Yes, oil, gas, and nuclear is just another way of saying, are we going to be serious about our growing energy needs, or are we not? Because oil, gas, and nuclear are the only three technologies, you could probably add coal, that can run an economy and a nation of this complexity. Full stop. Nothing else gets close. The total potential power for geothermal, total potential power for solar and wind is something like 4, 5, 6% of the total energy needs of this country. And so we continue to spend more and more brain power and more public opinion and all this other stuff on these green technologies that are going to come any day now if we keep pumping $500 million into a company. Think about this thing with Solyndra, folks. The thing that's most amazing about Solyndra is they took a check for $500 million and then they went bankrupt. How bankrupt do you have to be so that a check for $500 million doesn't get you anything? Man, that's kind of incompetence you really need a government to produce. So yes, the reason we had blackouts is because the state hasn't built a power plant, and this country hasn't built a nuclear power plant in 40 years, 50 years. Nuclear is awesome. And when they talk about nuclear power, they talk about these designs of these reactors. The ones that are online were designed in the 50s and the 60s in some cases. There's so many different technologies that are out there now that literally cannot melt down. It is physically impossible. It's not like there's don't worry, we've got a containment or we've got a backup for the pump. The physics will not allow it to happen. So there's that, and then let's talk about Fukushima reactors. Those things were engineered to survive a was it 8.0 or 9.0 magnitude earthquake? Well, the magnitude earthquake that hit them was higher than their design load, and the tsunami was higher than the design load, and the reactors failed. But not one person died. It's kind of obscene, isn't it? How many people died in that tsunami in Japan? Was it 30,000, 40,000 people killed with the wave? And all we do is talk about the reactors. You know how many people died from the failure of these reactors? The failure of the reactors, by the way, to loads that they were never designed for, and failure which was caused by them trying to save the reactor. If they'd pumped water into the reactors early, they would have ruined the reactors, but they wouldn't have had the problems they had. People died as a result of this? None. This catastrophic situation happened. And you know how many people died? None from that nuclear plant. And you find out little things like, well, the reactors wouldn't have had the problems, wouldn't have had the meltdown because they had backup generators that supplied the pumping power to keep them going. Backup diesel generators, fantastic. The problem was that the backup diesel generators were submerged by the tsunami. Well, we know about that now. We probably didn't know that in the past, but now we know. So just take an example of nuclear. It's just so ridiculous. It's so absurd, the level of fear we have over these things. Honestly, it's just unbelievable. So we have these rolling blackouts because California will not pay any money for power plants. Number of people still grows, although actually it's declining now. Maybe in another 20 years or 30 years we'll decline to the level of the surviving number of power plants. Who knows? But it's appalling, and it's going to get worse. And what do you say? Raphael Jebowitz just said, "Hey, all, I just got home from school. Hi, Mr. Whittle." Hi, Raphael. How are you? Yeah. Gas, oil. Look, oil, we have a lot of oil under our feet. People say wars for oil. I could do 10 minutes on this, and I'm not going to. But frankly, folks, if Iraq had been a war for oil, what would that have looked like? You hear it all the time. Oh, it's a war for oil. What would a war for oil look like? A war for oil looks like this. You forget the cities. You forget Mosul and Baghdad and Fallujah. You don't worry about them. Let those people kill themselves. It's none of our problem. It's not our business. We're here for the oil. You don't go into the cities at all. You destroy Saddam's army. You walk into Baghdad. You dictate the surrender document. You put a dictator in his place. You get out of the city. You go to the oil fields, and you put an armored cordon around those oil fields. And then you basically run convoys of trucks to the oil fields. You pump the stolen oil into the convoy. You take them directly to Basra. You put them on U.S. flag tankers, and you sail them back to the American people, and you cut the gas rate to 40 cents a gallon. That's what a war for oil looks like. And the reason that you don't see that in Iraq is because it wasn't a war for oil. We lost 4,000 people in the cities trying to rebuild that nation and give them a democracy. I think it was worth it. I know people disagree about this, but I think it was the worst region in the country, worst country in the region. Now it's one of two countries in the Middle East where Arabs get a free vote. The other one is Israel, by the way. So it's not a war for oil. We have more oil under our feet than we can burn, and natural gas through fracking, which was the savior here in California. We used to have these dirty diesel buses, and they'd start up and black clouds of smoke would come out. And everybody says, oh, we're switching to, was it CNG, compressed natural gas? Oh, it's going to be so clean. Fantastic. Now there's no emissions from the buses. We have 4 times the population in LA that we had in the late 70s, early 80s, and the air is far cleaner than it was because of these emission standards. And things like natural gas burning vehicles. So natural gas is the savior, right? Except for fracking. Because what they found out was, you put some engineers and some ingenuity on this problem, we might end up with free or cheap energy. Can't allow that to happen. Capitalism must be destroyed one way or another. So now natural gas is the villain because it works so well. Our carbon emissions are going down not because we decided to put them down because of government said we're going to have caps. Our carbon emissions are going down is because we're burning more natural gas, which is the cleanest carbon fuel there is, I believe, and less coal. Because the market did it, as usual. So, oil, gas, or nuclear? Yes, please, all 3. And throw some coal in there, too, because Some people need to burn some coal. Moving on. Dave Helton, weird question, a little offbeat. I liked it. Best beach in Florida. I've been on some good beaches in my life. I grew up in Bermuda, which were stunning. Just pink sand beaches in Bermuda, just absolutely breathtaking. I think those were probably the best beaches I've ever seen in the world. They were, certainly. And the water's just shockingly clear. We went out one day scuba diving when I was about 9, I guess, and we put little, those boxes, 4-sided box with a glass plane on the bottom so you can look down. And we saw the anchor rope going down. I could see fish cruising on the bottom, and it was 70 feet straight down. It was like you just reach out and touch it. Really clear. So Bermuda has the best beaches I've ever seen. The second best beach I ever saw was in Australia, just north of Brisbane. That sand was white. It wasn't as pretty as a Bermuda beach, but it was so clean that when you walked on it, it squeaked. It was like your shoes were like tennis shoes on sneakers on a basketball court. And so Australia had beautiful, beautiful beaches. I think the best beach in Florida, when I got out to Key Biscayne the first day, my brother and I, first day we arrived from Bermuda, we took our snorkels and our masks and our fins out to, our flippers, I should say, out to the beach and did a little snorkeling off the waters of Key Biscayne. We're just shocked at how awful it was. Just nothing but sand and a couple of, weeds. We're used to coral reefs and all these fish, and it was just blech. But I think the best beach in Florida would probably be Jupiter Inlet. Jupiter Inlet is a really neat little beach, very small. It's the only place on the Atlantic coast where you could get decent waves. You can do some fairly decent body surfing in Jupiter Inlet in Florida. I think it's got everything in terms of wave activity is based on the slope of the ground offshore. If it's a steep slope, when those smaller waves come, they're small because they're deep, and as the wave hits the ground, it's pushed up, and the steeper the slope, the higher the push. So Jupiter Inlet, for some reason, was really great. Jupiter's on the east coast. It's north of Fort Lauderdale, and I think it's probably north of West Palm. I don't really remember. The only other beach I had any experience with in Florida was it Crescent Beach? It's one of those drive-on beaches just south of St. Augustine. We'd go there from the University of Florida. I think it was Crescent Beach. And it was one of those drive-on beaches, not particularly beautiful beach, but it was a nice place you could go drive on as a college kid and drink beer and light fires. And man, I fell asleep and I woke up at about 11 o'clock in the morning in a sleeping bag. And if you've ever been on a Florida beach in a sleeping bag at 11 o'clock in the morning after drinking a fair amount of beer, it is not a pleasant experience. I'd do it again tomorrow. So that's that question there from Dave Hilton. Moving on. Yeah, we're doing all right. Cynthia Wilson, what's your favorite book? That's a great 4-word question. And my answer is The Innocents Abroad, by a pretty wide margin. Innocents Abroad, The Innocents Abroad is Mark Twain's first book. It was written in 1867. It was the first travel book ever written, I think. And that's not true. They'd written travel guides. But Civil War was just over 2 years ago, and it was the first pleasure cruise. It was the first kind of a cruise. Somebody put together a cruise that was going to leave from New York and was going to tour Europe, and then go down through the Holy Land. And Twain convinced a newspaper to send him, so he went. And they did the whole European tour, and then they did overland camel stuff, and he did all of the biblical sites. And it's Mark Twain at his youngest. It was his breakout book. It really wasn't well known before that, but that book really opened him up. So it's Mark Twain at his youngest, and that means it's Mark Twain at his most innocent. It's Mark Twain at his happiest. He got very, very bitter after his children died and his wife died, and any number of things. He turned into a very, very sour guy in his final years. But he was young and very, 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 very funny. And the reason I say it's my favorite book is because if you read it, it's just a great read. But the thing that's so remarkable about The Innocents Abroad is that I read it last year, 2012, and nothing has changed in Europe or in the Middle East. The eyes of an American, these kind of frontier eyes viewing European cultures, France and Spain and Germany, and then viewing the Holy Land and the Muslim presence down there and everything. Nothing has changed. It's like it was written yesterday. It's probably I think Matt J. Harris says in the comments, available on Project Gutenberg. That's where I got it. I got it free. You can get it on your iPad or your iPhone or whatever. It's just the most amazing book, and it is blindingly funny in places. There's a scene where he has and you get to discover this with him because it's quite a large book. You begin to develop a real hatred for these tour guides, these professional tour guides, and he found some guy in Italy who was particularly obnoxious. And he and the rest of the guys, there was a group of about 4 or 5 of these guys who were just the greatest smartasses in the world. And I'll tell you, folks, if I could have dinner with 3 historical figures, I'd have dinner with Mark Twain, Winston Churchill, and then Mark Twain again. To have been one of those 4 or 5 guys must have been just absolutely the greatest experience ever. But he's talking about this Italian guide in Innocents Abroad, and they had one guy who was named the Doctor, and the Doctor had the ability. He was a really bright guy, very astute guy, but he had the ability to project this kind of pompous, stone dumb ignorance, this sort of pompous sort of thing. So this Italian guide would take him to this museum, and they'd show him. Monsieur, here is the letter. It's written by Christopher Columbus. Written by Christopher Columbus in his own hand. Written by Christopher Columbus. And this guy would look at it and go, Now see here. We have 9th grade students back in the United States with better handwriting than this. If you have a decent handwriting sample, then trot it out. Otherwise, we're not born yesterday. Lead on. Oh, no, it's Christopher Columbus. He discovered America. Well, surely that's not possible because we've come from America ourselves. No, Christopher Columbus discovered the country. He discovered America 400 years ago. Christopher Columbus, you say? Yes, Christopher Columbus, famous Christopher Columbus. 400 years ago? Yes. Still alive, is he? No, been dead 4 centuries. What about his parents? Are they alive? No, he's dead 4 centuries. I just used to drive these guys crazy. It's just so funny. He did the same thing with a mummy. They show him, it's Egyptian mummy from Egypt. It says Egypt, huh? Must be some sort of local principality or something. What's this fellow's problem anyway? Well, why is he being so quiet? Mummy, Egyptian mummy, been dead 3,000 years. And then this guy, the Doctor, would just tee off. He'd just tee off on this guy. Now you see here, if you have any fresh corpses, you trot them out right now. Otherwise, we're not to be taken fools. We're not to be made fools of. What do you think we are here, by the way? If you have any fresh corpses, trot them out. Otherwise, move on. And they did the one thing where they would see all these, so many of the things in Europe were cathedrals made of bones and all these people interred and all these mummies and all these relics and all this other stuff. And they would always just, every time they'd come across like a mummy or some saint or somebody preserved behind glass or something, they would sit there, these 5 or 6 Americans, and they'd all look at it for the longest time. They'd give it this very serious look. And it was an ongoing joke between the 5 of them or 4 of them, however many it was. They tried to see who could last the longest because it was such a source of like this just perfect, exquisite pleasure for them. And they'd see how long they could hold it. And they said sometimes they could hold it for like 15 minutes. Think about that. They'd stare at this mummy behind glass, or they'd stare at this coffin with this guy in it, and they'd look at it for 15 minutes, look at each other and look around. It would be very impressive. They turn to the tour guide and they go, is he dead? When you have a running joke like that with Mark Twain for 5 months, man, I would have given arms and legs to have been on that trip. So my favorite book is The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain, available for free. Please read it. You can't go wrong. George A. George A. Freeland asks a great question. Culture of skill, how? I've never heard that term before. I don't know if you coined it or not, George, but if you haven't, you should. It's a magnificent turn of phrase. Culture of skill. The second you said it, I knew exactly what you meant. I'm friends with guys like Burt Rutan and the whole crew up at X-Corps, and a number of pilots, and a guy named Brent Regan who's an engineer and builds amazing things like Wave Runner. And anytime I see any kind of skill at all, I'm automatically just reduced to a place of great humility and joy. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. That applies to skill in the janitorial arts. That applies to skill in fast food preparation, fast food restaurant management. Anybody who's good at anything, I like. I like that person. And I respect that person. I don't care what they believe. As long as they're good at what they do, that's an enormous part of what I think is important in life. So the culture of skill is a really interesting idea. I feel like we used to be a culture of skill, before everybody was special, back when you had to do something to become special, achieve something. Skill was necessary. We still have a culture of skill in terms of our sports. We worship inappropriately. I'm not one of these people who says it's wrong to worship sports people. No, they do something remarkable, beautiful, elegant, and it's fun watching humans perform at their limits. So we still have a culture of skill in professional sports. We like to watch amazing baseball plays and football plays and so on. But by and large, skill is falling by the wayside, and the idea of skill is falling by the wayside. And so the question really is culture of skill, how? How do we get back to that, I would imagine? And I think we've really lost our way with our education system. As Glenn Reynolds and others point out, our current education system was designed for second wave industrial era society where you need to create factory workers, basically. And so you want a standardized test, and you want everybody of the same age to take the same class, even though some people learn faster than others. We really should be grouping people according to ability and aptitude rather than age, but we do that. We group them according to ability and aptitude in sports, don't we? I mean, you look at a college football team, you've got freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And they're all playing. The good guys are playing. The guys who are not so good aren't playing. This second wave kind of mechanized sort of education system has not served us well lately as we get into the information age. So I think the one thing that we probably need to do to get a culture of skill back would be to return, and quickly, to a system that actually works extraordinarily well. And that's the apprenticeship system. Too many syllables there, and I stumbled and fell. The beautiful thing about an apprenticeship system is you not only get the skill, you also get the attitude. You get the discipline. You get somebody who's watching you and making and teaching you why the easy way is not the way to do it. It gives you a sense not only of the actual skill set, but a sense of the ethics and the culture of the particular skill. Woodwork, for example. When you apprentice to a master, or even to somebody, just a shop foreman, somebody who knows what they're doing, but let's say it's a master. When you apprentice to them, you're not just learning physically how to do it, you're learning why and a lot of the deep stuff. And we've really gotten away from the apprenticeship system, and I think it's a great shame, because I think that's how skill is taught and respect for the trade is taught, and all these other things. And we certainly have grossly undervalued people who work with their hands in this country. They feed all of us, first of all, and they build the stuff that we live in and use. So I think this business of us, kind of looking at, university professors and politicians and stuff as, or even business executives as, the kind of cognitive elite is a big problem. The bell curve talks about this quite a bit in terms of the danger of separating the cognitive elite and getting them out of society and putting them in a little bubble on their own. All of these jobs are important. Business managers are important too, obviously. But I think a culture of skill is a lovely expression, and I'd like to see us get back to that. And I think the answer is apprenticeship. And things like internship are kind of interesting. I know the left hates this because they're using people who aren't getting paid or not paid minimum wage. But what an internship is, I got my first job as an intern, and my entire career is a result of an intern. I worked at the planetarium for free for 3-4 weeks before they started paying me, out of sympathy, really, more than anything. But if I hadn't worked as an usher in the Miami Planetarium and cleaned up vomit and taken tickets and shown people to seats with a red flashlight, then I wouldn't have had a chance to write those planetarium shows or to do those star lectures in front of 300 people when I was 14 or something like that. Speaking to crowds of people at night or in a dark room, talking about the constellations, that's a skill set. And writing planetarium shows is a skill set, and those have served me well over the years. So I got that through apprenticeship, through being the bottom. I was the bottom. That's how you should start. It's appropriate, and the more of the bottom of the stack you come in on, the better you'll understand the system. That's why the idea of a person who's promoted from the mailroom as a mail boy all the way up to the company president is actually a very good model. It's a guy who understands everything about the company. That's exactly what you want. You want a general manager. You have specific business guys; those are appropriate too. But that kind of 30,000-foot view is important. Anyway, that's a great question. So thanks very much, George. Teresa Heiser wants to know the worst movie ever. I'm going to have to go with a movie I haven't seen, but White House Down looks like the worst movie ever in terms of just plain raw obnoxiousness. The short answer really is a little facile. Let's just put that aside. But literally everything I saw about that movie and the hypocrisy of Jamie Foxx, that miserable racist hypocrite who's standing there somberly right after Sandy Hook saying we've got to stop the culture of gun violence in this country. Please pick a side and be on that side, Jamie. The worst movie ever, no one has seen the worst movie ever. This is the point I'm trying to make. The actual worst movie ever has never been seen by you or I. The worst movies that I have seen are completely unmemorable. I couldn't even tell you the name of them. I've seen them in film schools, or I've seen them as projects, or the worst movies ever made are the ones that are finished and they sit on the shelf and never been distributed. When we talk about the worst movie ever, somebody just mentioned my friend Mike Rowe over there in the comment section. I wouldn't call him a close friend, but we're acquainted, and he's a great guy too. He's a real normal, regular, everyday guy. He's an awesome dude, Mike Rowe. Like him very much. So the worst movie ever no one has seen. So when we talk about the worst movie ever, what we're talking about are movies that are spectacular and have seen by people. Brian Olsen says Avatar's the worst movie ever. Avatar's a pretty bad movie. It's not the worst movie ever. People have said Plan 9 from Outer Space is the worst movie ever. Plan 9 from Outer Space is a spectacularly bad movie. Now we start getting into problems with meaning, though, because Plan 9 from Outer Space is a tremendously entertaining movie because it's so appalling. So comes a point where you actually get out of the bottom of the bucket, right? And now it's like, now this movie is so bad that it's actually interesting. And then it's so bad that it's hilarious. But the worst movies ever made are films that you've seen and completely forgotten. Along these lines, I've read a screenplay book called Story by Robert McKee. I think I talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago. It's fundamentally rewired my brain. So rewriting Aurora because of that, and I'm going to be doing a movie before Aurora because of that. A little low-budget sci-fi horror movie, which I'll talk about in the near future. So I would just go with worst movie ever off the top of my head, putting White House Down aside because I didn't actually see it. I saw a movie about, 7-8 years ago in Santa Monica Art House. It was a Polish movie about a guy dying of cancer, and it was called Life as a Communicable Fatal Disease, I think. Yeah. Wow. If you ever want to see a Polish film about somebody dying of cancer over 3 hours, that'd be the one to see. That was like, it wasn't so bad it was good. It was just so bad it was bad. Anyway, that was my worst movie ever. James Stockman and Steve Danskin asked two questions that are very similar. So I'll take them together. James Stockton wants to know social justice versus justice. Well said. And Steve Danskin wants to know individual versus identity politics, which are kind of the same thing. Let's talk about the justice issue first. Social justice versus justice. They are opposed to each other. Social justice is revenge justice. It's not justice. Social justice is revenge. Social justice is a term we use to entitle a certain group of people to take things from other people because of damage that may or may not have been done to their ancestors. So the problem with social justice is that the victims are not rewarded. The perpetrators are not punished. Great example of social justice is this entire reparations for slavery thing. People whose parents, no, people who 6 or 7 generations ago may have held slaves, are expected to pay another group of people who 6 or 7 generations ago were slaves, or may not have been, because most blacks in America are not descended from slaves. But a whole group of people is saying, we want to take from you and give to us because of what happened, and that's social justice. No, it's not. It's stealing, and it's not social justice at all. Likewise, if a gay man, young man, is beaten up by 3 guys and tied to the back of a pickup truck and drugged down the road for 5 miles, that's not a special crime. That's first-degree murder. That's what the crime is called. The crime is called first-degree murder, and those people that did it should be put in the electric chair. There's nothing special about him. It's not a hate crime because he's gay. I don't buy it. I just don't. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. I understand what the mechanism is. I understand why they're doing it, but the case doesn't stand to me. I'm sorry, is first-degree murder not an adequate punishment for what happened to that guy? Where do you go from that? It's a hate crime. Folks, everything is a hate crime. Every crime is a hate crime. That's actually a kind of a pithy sentence. I think maybe somebody should write that down and say Bill Riddle wrote that, because it's true. Every crime is a hate crime. What a profound insight I just came up with. I'm so pleased with myself. But it's really true. If you think about it, every crime is a hate crime. Every one of them. If you steal a candy bar from a 7-Eleven, you're expressing your contempt for the individual owner of that store who is going to have to make that up out of his own pocket. It's a hate crime. Certainly when you invade somebody's house, even if you're just burglarizing the house, you're taking people's jewelry, you're taking people's family heirlooms, you're taking things that they've worked for weeks or months or years to achieve, and you're just taking it and walking it out. What do you call that? Of course it's hate crime. Of course it's hatred towards the people in there. It's dehumanizing the people whose lives you've just stolen. And not only have you stolen their stuff and have you stolen their memories, you've stolen their sense of security. They'll never be quite the same again. They'll never sleep quite the same again because of your actions. Of course it's a hate crime. You can play this game forever. No. First-degree murder is a crime. Burglary is a crime. Aggravated assault is a crime. Rape is a crime. Those are good enough. Social justice is not justice. There's only individual justice. Was somebody injured by somebody else? Yes. Did the perpetrator pay? Yes or no? If they didn't pay, it's not justice. If they did, it is. If the perpetrator and the victims are not connected, then it's not justice. In other words, if you're being asked to pay for slavery reparations when you never held slaves to somebody else who never was a slave, that's not justice. Now, the people who were slaves might be entitled to some justice, and they were denied that justice, but by re-inflicting injustice on other people doesn't retroactively make that just. You can't go and retroactively fix those people who are victims of slavery. You can't do anything for them. They're dead. They've been dead for 200 years. So what do you do? What do? You eliminate the injustice, but you don't erase the injustice. You stop doing it. You can't go back and repair those victims and make them whole. And you certainly can't do it by making an entirely new class of victims and a whole new injustice upon the people who weren't even the perpetrators. So, anyway, that's my vision of social justice. It doesn't exist. It's a weapon used to bludgeon people into doing what they want politically. Just keep that in mind. You won't have any problems. Individual versus identity politics. Identity politics is the same thing. Identity politics is part of critical theory. It, coupled with critical theory, is the sword. Political correctness is the shield. These are the weapons that they use to divide the country into tribes that can then be played not against each other. They're too smart for that. Every single one of these tribes is placed against the middle, is against the dominant culture. That's what has to be destroyed, the dominant culture, which in our case is a very tough thing to destroy because our dominant culture is everyone has access to the dominant culture. Our dominant culture, for the first time in history, said, e pluribus unum, out of many one. Come here, legally, fill out the forms, stand in line, take the test, raise your right hand. You're as American as anybody else. You're probably more American than anybody else because you've gone to enormous trouble and risk to be here. How do you defeat that? That's rather a profoundly inclusive system of beliefs. Well, you have to divide the country up into tribes, and you have to tell them that they've had horrible injustices done to them, and you have to tell them that they're owed money and benefits from other people, and you play on people's sense of envy and greed and laziness. These are powerful motivators, and if you don't think they are, think about this. Every animal in the world, every single animal in the world, from bacteria to blue whales, will eat garbage if the garbage is in front of them, then go out and get better food if it requires more effort. You put free food down, you get fat cats, you get fat people, you get fat squirrels, you get fat bacteria. You get a lot of bacteria anyway. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple. So, yeah, it's a great question. We're almost done. 4 or 5 more. Not too bad on time, probably about hour 45 tonight. Daniel Schweitzer wants to know, was Andrew Breitbart murdered? I get this question quite a lot. No. And the only reason I took it, and I've taken it many times, is that every time it comes up, I'm going to take this question. Was Andrew Breitbart murdered? No, he was not murdered. Daniel, there's enough to worry about out there that's really happening so that we don't have to invent stuff to have happen. Andrew Breitbart died of a heart attack. I know this to be the actual case because a year before he died, he had another heart attack, a previous heart attack. He had that heart attack 24 hours after Jeremy and I took him out to dinner and say, Andrew, we're worried about you. You're working too hard. You're overweight, and you're pushing yourself too hard. And if you don't slow down, you're going to have a heart attack. Took him out to a barbecue ribs place. Maybe not the first choice for a heart victim, in retrospect, but we did. And 24 hours later, he called us from the hospital and said, remember yesterday when you told me to slow down, take it easy? Yep. Well, I'm in the hospital now. I had a heart attack. And for 4 or 5 months, he did. He lost weight, and he put some of this away. And then he didn't. He just got wrapped up in it again. He loved it too much. He couldn't put it down. And it killed him. I've often said that, it'll kill all of us too if we don't go home at the end of the day and go back to our beach or whatever we have in our head, some safe place. But no, he wasn't murdered. You don't need to worry about that. And by the way, Daniel and all the rest of us out there, not just you, because I'm a victim of this too. You think about these kind of things, but really, when you get down to think about it, so much of our thinking on this business of people being murdered for political reasons is based on what we see in movies and what we see in lawless places, although it's pretty rare in lawless places too, to be honest with you. Assassination is an assassination, but a behind-the-scenes murder of people who are public figures or political figures in this country is virtually unheard of. I think it's a good story, but if you think about it, if people were being murdered, why is Rush Limbaugh still alive? Why is Glenn Beck still alive? Why are any of these whistleblowers still alive? Why is, all this stuff? Why didn't the Benghazi survivors get into an unfortunate helicopter crash? It's not that dramatic. Killing people is an act of monumental consequence, and I am not aware of any any murders, that I'm aware of. There was that one guy in the Clinton administration, I forgot his name now, right at the beginning, looked a little suspicious. I'm very disinclined to believe these kind of things. I can be convinced with enough evidence, but Andrew Breitbart story I know very well, because he's a friend of mine. And no, he wasn't murdered. Daniel, you should be relieved to hear that news and not, anything other than relieved, because we got enough problems out there without having to make our own. Randy Pedrad wants to know, when does it end? I'll take that 2 ways, Randy. This society we live in now, and this structure of what we've got with the government and the spending, cannot go on forever, and everybody knows it. So I don't know when that ends. As I said earlier in the show, I suspect, like any other addict, the money addicts this will end when they run out of money, and when other people recognize that there is no more money, they'll give them any more money because there is no more money. One of the things I heard about these kind of things with runaway inflation reminds me of a saying I heard about a person who went bankrupt. They asked a really rich guy, they said, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, slowly at first and then very quickly. And then I think that's pretty much what's going to happen. I think that if we run into these kind of economic troubles we discussed earlier, it's going to happen slowly at first and then very quickly. So when does it end? I don't know. But I'm going to go deeper with this question than that. Because when I was doing a lot of speaking first half of the year, I realized we can never win. We can only lose. They can win, but we can never win, because human nature is against what we're trying to do. We're trying to roll a boulder uphill. This idea of individual liberty, individual freedom, individual responsibility, hard work and reward, small government, all these things are unique in history. They've never been tried before. They've never worked before. They worked here for quite a long time. But the forces that they were fighting against are getting stronger, and our ability to fight against them is getting weaker. And so we may have to lose this fight. It's not going to happen while I'm still alive. There's going to be a pocket of freedom as long as I walk this earth, and I'm sure that's true for every one of you too, and for your children. But it never ends for us. This is the thing I realized about conservatism. Conservatism is mowing the lawn. Collectivism is the grass grows. Everybody wants stuff for free, including me. Everybody wants stuff for free. And people are willing to give people stuff for free in order so they can take their stuff and give it back to them. I'll take $1 from you. I'll give you back 4 cents. You'll worship me like I was the golden calf. If they didn't see how you took the $1, hey, the guy just gave me 4 cents. Fabulous. So what we have is this society and this ideals that we hold can never win. We can only just mow the lawn that day. We can just win today. And live free today. We can have a free society today. All these forces are against us, and I know this is very depressing, but it's important to understand it. We have to get out there and mow the lawn every week, or every month, or every year. And the longer we take between mowing, the worse it's going to be and the harder it's going to be. If we mowed the lawn every week, we'd have a nice, neat lawn. We did that for 220 years in this country. The grass is growing, and we're not mowing it. We can never beat progressivism. There's always going to be people that want things for free. That rock is always going to roll down the hill every night. We just have to make a choice whether we want to roll it up again every morning. And if we say no, then okay. But if we say no, we'll get the consequences of it. There is the work is its own reward. The rolling the rock up the hill is its own reward. And Sisyphus was considered a curse because every day he rolled it up the hill, and every night it came back and he had to roll it up the hill again. Why did he do it? Anybody ever wonder about that? The curse of Sisyphus. Why don't you just say, screw it? Let the rock sit where it wants to. I don't care. None of my business. Not my rock. It's not on me. Why did he do it? He thought the rock belonged up at the top of the hill. So do I. So we get up every day and we do it. And that's why we're here. Because we've done it and our ancestors have done it. Our forefathers and foremothers have done it. And people who've died overseas and never came home thought that rock belonged at the top of the hill too. We owe those people. That's why I get up every day and do it. So that's when it ends, I think, Randy. It ends when we stop trying. And as long as we keep fighting, it never ends. Like they say in Battlestar Galactica. Starbuck has that line, I think, right? We're going to fight them until we can't anymore. So there you go. I've seen this question 4 or 5 times. I've never understood it. I finally decided to take it. Sorry, I didn't get to it earlier. Andy Schnick wants to know, Moonraker, Aurora, any similarities? Man, I hope not. The Aurora is going to get rewritten on the basis of this screenplay book, the storybook rather, and focus it more on one individual rather than the mission, make it more about a person, which is really long overdue insight for me. But as I remember Moonraker, I saw it back in the 70s, I guess, when I loved everything that was sci-fi and big into James Bond when I was a kid. I just thought, okay, this is just kind of, Roger Moore doing, kind of the prancing kind of, ironic James Bond out in space. I have no memories of Moonraker. I certainly hope it's got no similarities to Aurora, which is about a private space mission to Jupiter. Moonraker, as I recall, was just something to do with kind of shuttles in orbit, space station, something like that. But no. Moonraker may have more in common with Gravity, which is coming out soon. But no, I don't see any similarities. But anyway, I thought I'd finally answer it for you. Two questions to go. And they're just run-of-the-mill questions, which is why we like them. Jeannie Tyson wants to know, do you play sports? I don't, and I need to. The only things I've ever done really, I don't want to say athletically because it's a bit overstatement. I played Little League Baseball when I was a kid. I loved it. I really missed it. I played first base. I was a right-hander, so you're certainly not going to ever get good being a right-handed first baseman, but it was the only position that was good for me. I played right field when I started, and that's where you put all the losers, the kids who got no talent. And I didn't have the arm to get throws into the infield, but I had enough of an arm, and I was quick enough so that I was a pretty good first baseman, and I was tall, and I could stretch, and I catch just about anything that was thrown my way. And I once caught, I was standing there once on first baseline. I was probably, I was 10, I guess, something 10, 11.
And we're in this game, and this kid just knocks this line drive between first and second. I went out and just caught it. No bounce catch. Just it wasn't a fly ball, just a liner. Just bam, I just caught it. And it was a third out, so I'm running back into the dugout, or the benches. It should have been a dugout. And everybody was like cheering and yelling, and I thought, what's the big deal? And then I realized, I grabbed it with my bare hand. Just reach out and just snagged it with my bare hand, which sounds more impressive than it really was, because if you did that with a pro player, it's a pretty big deal. But for a 10-year-old kid at bat, it's probably not that big a deal. But I did. It was like my big play. And I had a couple big plays in the World Series game that we won. We went 0-10 our first year, 10-0 our second. I played right field the first year, first base the second. I don't know what else could explain it. But that, and then we had a really nice tradition down in South Florida. I lived on Key Biscayne for quite a long time. My friend Fritz Bronner, who's still my good friend, I've been friends with Fritz for 44 years now. For many years, throughout high school, junior high and high school, maybe a year or two afterwards in college, Fritz had always gotten us together for a Christmas Day football game. That's a really grand idea. So we'd meet in a park in Coral Gables, and every Christmas we'd play touch football for hours and hours and hours. It was really, really fun. Nothing's going on Christmas Day. You're a teenager. You're not really into the presents, and even if you are, you're done. So we just get together around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in Coral Gables and play till about 4. It started to get dark around 5, and that was a lot of fun. And then only just done some, body surfing and snorkeling. I played a little volleyball when I first got out here. I was okay volleyball player. I could surf pretty well. And I like volleyball, but I'm not, I don't go play often. So I'm sad to say no. I don't. But the times I have done it, I've really enjoyed it. And the final question. What a build. What an incredible build. Your favorite meal is? My penultimate favorite meal. 2 times in one show for penultimate. My penultimate favorite meal is, I better be careful with the term penultimate in Obama's America, and it has certain implications to it that I don't particularly like in terms of my next to last meal. But my second favorite meal, without question, I think is Chick-fil-A sandwich, waffle fries, and a large lemonade. Man, that's once you peel those horrid pickles off of there and put a little mayonnaise on that baby, that's as good as lunch gets. Man, that's delicious. It's making me hungry right now. I want one so bad. The nearest one's 40 miles away in LA traffic. That means 3 hours. So I do love my Chick-fil-A. My favorite meal, though, without question, is Thanksgiving dinner. I don't know whether it got to be my favorite meal because I like Thanksgiving so much, but I suspect not. I think roast turkey, mashed potatoes. My Aunt Marty, who just had her 90th birthday, by the way, made sweet potatoes, those yams. She took about 4 days, I think. You just start cooking them 4 days later, and she'd probably wake up every hour through the night for the 48 hours or 50 hours or whatever, and rebaste them, and, every hour put new sugar on them and new, molasses. And by the time they come, they look like sweet potatoes, but they were just almost like paste, just sugar and starch paste, and they're the best tasting damn things on the face of planet Earth. God, those were delicious. So, those are it. And pumpkin pie, my golly. American Thanksgiving dinner is, I think, the best food on the face of the earth. I like a good steak, too. There's some really great steakhouses in town here. Mastro's is really good. And Ruth's Chris in D.C. I've been to, and I've been to here a couple times. A really great steakhouse. Don't like aged steak much. It's kind of, I don't know. I just don't like it at all. Had a really aged steak once when I was up in Ottawa, and it was like new. But yeah, I'm a real meat and potatoes guy. I really am. Very plain. I'm like the biggest food sissy in the universe. I don't eat any kind of seafood at all. None. That comes out of the ocean. No, thank you. No shrimp. No lobster. No fish. Oysters. No, thank you. I grew up snorkeling. I know what goes on down there. I've seen it all. I want nothing to do with it. Yeah, I like little baby garlic potatoes. And I'm starving. I haven't eaten anything all day. I'm really hungry. So I think it's time to call it a night. An hour and 2 hours according to this. That includes the warm-up. So hour 45, and that's episode 33 of the Stratosphere Lounge, your 4 questions edition. of the Stratosphere Lounge. Next show, I think next Wednesday's good. Let me just check my calendar. I got some traveling coming up. I'll try to shoot some V-POTUS next week, but I think I've got a chance to do it. So right now, as far as I'm concerned, it's on until I hear otherwise. I'll let you know. Next show will be the 3-question edition, and then will come the 2-question edition, then the haiku edition, and finally the black belt round of 1 question. And then we'll start our Bible study again with full questions. Anyway, that's it. The Stratosphere Lounge, as always. I can't thank you folks enough. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk to you directly, and it's always given me a tremendous source of a pleasure to be able to return some small part of this to those of you who are kind of the most hardcore people on the website. Thanks for everything, and we have some really interesting developments coming up very soon. Hopefully by next week we can really announce some earth-shaking stuff, really, really interesting, fun stuff. So until next time, this is Bill Whittle at the Stratosphere Lounge, coming to you live from beautiful downtown Sherman Oaks, California. Be careful out there. Have a good time. Don't let the bastards keep you down. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.